is just fantastic. Probably, though, a question that might be more appropriate after your presentation, but what can the Park Service do to make Culp's Hill and Spangler Spring area more appealing to visitors? It's just often ignored.
So the question is in regards to Culp's Hill and Spangler Spring. We're going to talk a lot about Culp's Hill in this program, how to make it more appealing to visitors. It needs a movie and a documentary. So if you watch Ken Burns' 11-hour Civil War documentary, like 3 hours of it is on Little Round Top. At the same point in time, coming out around 60 years ago, we have the book The Killer Angels, which focuses on really two actions at Gettysburg, Little Round Top and Pickett's Charge. So that shoves a lot of attention away from Culp's Hill. And then you get the movie Gettysburg, which is based on The Killer Angels, so focuses on Little Round Top and Pickett's Charge. So for the public, or the American consciousness, the public consciousness, when they think about Gettysburg over the last 60 years, Little Round Top and Pickett's Charge has become very, very entrenched. Now, if you are to look at the veterans of this battle that come back to this battlefield, north and south, in the immediate years after the war, and really through the turn of the century, the place they go to visit, the place they put importance on, is Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. The first veteran reunions are on Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. The first monuments on the battlefield are on Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. Not Little Round Top, not Pickett's Charge. The veterans on both sides recognize the importance of Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. And that is a discussion we can get into definitely after the program of why the veterans place so much importance on it. But hopefully you'll see a little bit of that in this program. So with that, we've got 10 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started because we've got a lot of ground to cover today. And I'd like to welcome you all here to Gettysburg National Military Park. My name is Dan Welch. I'm a park ranger here at Gettysburg. And this is the second day of the 163rd anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. And we are so excited to have you all here and inside in the nice air conditioning. I know for many of you that have attended our anniversary programs over the years, it looks a little different this year. But the unprecedented heat wave we have has just made field conditions just too unsafe for you and for staff. So we really appreciate you being flexible and safety conscious during your visit here during the 163rd anniversary. With that being said, we have pivoted and moved our anniversary programming indoors, and we've got another full slate of lectures today. Following my program today at 11:30, we're going to hear a little bit about George Sykes by Ranger John Hoptack. At 1 o'clock, we're going to hear about Union Chaplains by Ranger Danny Brennan. And this afternoon, we'll conclude with the same series that we started yesterday, our Voices of Battle program, where we're going to tell the overview of the events of July 2nd through the voices of those that experienced it firsthand. So I want to start the program today, for those of you that were here yesterday, with a question one of my colleagues got. Ranger Carlton Smith did a program yesterday afternoon on spying for General Longstreet. Before his program started, someone in the audience asked, who do you think is the most underrated general or the most overlooked general from the Battle of Gettysburg? And I will tell you, as I was standing in the back, I had one hand in my mouth and I was sitting on the other one because, man, did I really want to say, call on me, call on me. And I think General Doubleday was mentioned. I know my colleague, Ranger Smith, has been doing an extraordinary amount of research over the last almost year now on Joseph Hooker. He posited Hooker's impact on the Gettysburg campaign. Hooker doesn't fight here, but it's his army that wins this battle. No doubt about it. But there I am in the back, and I really want to scream out, it's this guy right here, George Sears Greene. He's a general. He's here at Gettysburg, and he is perhaps the most underrated or overlooked general as it relates to the fighting on July 2nd, 1863. Well, we're going to start the program with someone that is not overlooked by any stretch of the imagination here at the battlefield of Gettysburg. And of course, that is Major General Daniel Sickles. Now, 8 years following the death of Brigadier General George Sears Greene, a monument to Greene would be dedicated on the slopes of Culp's Hill near its summit on Friday, September the 27th, 1907. The project of getting a monument to Greene up on Culp's Hill, including overseeing the likeness that was created by the sculptor, all of that is being headed by Dan Sickles. Now, Greene has family members that are still alive. I think he would know, his likeness the best, but Dan Sickles completely in charge of getting Greene's likeness in bronze, absolutely perfect, getting the monument up on Culp's Hill. So finally in 1907, the monument is ready and it's going to be dedicated on the summit of Culp's Hill. And there in attendance, among many of Greene's family members, was one of Greene's sons, George Sears Greene Jr. And Jr. would be tasked with pulling the tarp from the monument and revealing the final product that had been placed there. And following that moment, it would be General Sickles yet again. Not only does he get the monument there, not only is he in charge of its likeness, but he is also going to give the main dedication speech of this monument to George Sears Greene. And one of the things you need to know about General Sickles, if you don't already, is he has a personality where he likes to take credit for everything. Credit for stuff he did, credit for things other people did. It is shocking when you read his dedication speech in 1907 that he allows George Greene to have a little credit. And Sickles doesn't take any credit for what Greene does on Culp's Hill, allows Greene to have that credit. And so I wanted to kind of introduce you to Greene's performance here at Gettysburg on July 2nd, 1863, by a portion of Sickles' speech at the dedication to Greene's monument. Sickles said, quote, "The battle fought here by General Greene on the night of July 2nd, 1863, to hold possession of Culp's Hill has a conspicuous place in history. It is memorable not so much for the number of the combatants engaged, as it is for the skill of the general, the heroic conduct of the troops, and in view of the consequences that would have followed the defeat of the Union forces." How interesting that General Sickles in 1907 is not saying Little Round Top, Pickett's Charge, Cemetery Ridge. He is saying Culp's Hill. So already we've heard a little bit about George Sears Greene. He does something incredible at Culp's Hill on July 2nd. But who is this guy? George Sears Greene has the distinction of being the oldest Union general here at the Battle of Gettysburg. He had been born in Rhode Island in May of 1801. He is 62 years of age during the Battle of Gettysburg. Greene comes from a pretty prominent family. Some of his ancestors helped settle the colony of Rhode Island. Other ancestors had been a governor of the colony, lieutenant governor of the state, U.S. senators, justices of the Supreme Court, and even distantly related to Revolutionary War General Nathaniel Greene. Greene was one of 9 children that had been born to his folks, only 5 of whom survived infancy. And because the Greene family is a large, prominent family, there is a path forward for Greene in the avenue of education. He's going to be well educated. He's going to be well taken care of. Family has money. They're prominent. He is going to go to the best schools. He is going to college and be set up for life. Unfortunately, Greene's father's large business stakes are in that of merchant and shipping industry. And based upon the effects of the Embargo Act of 1807, it wipes out the family fortune. And now Greene's whole trajectory in life has radically changed. So instead of being able to go to college, Greene's got to go find a job. And he moves to New York City, and he's going to take up a job at a dry good merchant's office. And while he is working in this dry good merchant's office in New York City, one of the customers coming in is a man by the name of Sylvanus Thayer. Sylvanus Thayer happens to be the commandant of a school by the name of West Point at the time. And Thayer really likes the interactions he's had with Greene and sees something in him. And so Thayer recommends Greene for an appointment to West Point. And you better bet, if the commandant of West Point writes you a recommendation, you're not going to have any problem getting into the school. And so now Greene is off to West Point, and he excels. He will graduate second in his class of 79 cadets. One of the things you will learn about Greene today in this program is he has astonishing intellectual capacity. He is a quick study. And it is through his vast experience leading up to the Battle of Gettysburg, through the course of studying different fields and professions, and on-the-field experience in the pre-war Army, that he is going to bring that to use on the slopes of Culp's Hill. So Greene goes to West Point. He graduates second in his class. They like what he does so much throughout his studies. He makes such a good impression that upon graduation, he's not immediately sent out into the field. He's put on staff as a teacher at West Point. I mean, could you imagine graduating, in the spring, and a couple of weeks later, you're teaching the next round of cadets? He's very, very adept at mathematics and artillery. That's what he's going to teach at West Point for several years. He'll then be sent on almost like a speaking tour, if you will. He'll go to some different Army installations across the country, have them work on their artillery drill, have them work on refining, their practice, the art of war at these garrison-type forts. But finally, the Army says, listen, we gave you your commission. You've been teaching for a while, you've got to get some field service. By this point in time, Greene is married, has 3 young children, and he is going to be sent to Fort Sullivan, Maine. And if any of you know where Fort Sullivan, Maine is located, my goodness, you should be on Jeopardy. It is in the middle of nowhere, Maine. It is in the far northeast coast of Maine. We're talking like yards away from the next country over. I mean, it is just way out there. In the 1830s, you can imagine, it's really in the middle of nowhere. And when Greene gets stationed there, he brings with him his young wife and his 3 kids. Officers in the 18th century and 19th century are allowed to bring their families with him. And so Greene does that. And tragically, between 1832 and 1833, they've been out to Fort Sullivan about a year. About 18 months in, Greene starts experiencing tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. In a 9-month period between 1832 and 1833, his wife and all 3 of his small children die at the fort. It devastates him. And so Greene, to deal with this grief, this overwhelming personal tragedy, is going to turn not to the bottle, but to books. And he's going to invest himself in studying numerous other topics and professions. One former veteran of the Civil War that profiled Greene wrote that following this tragedy, during the next 3 years, he read exhaustive course in law and medicine. He qualified himself to pass examinations admitting him to the practice in either of these professions. He also continued his studies in engineering, which he had pursued at all times since graduation at West Point. Here is a man wrapped up in such overwhelming grief. He teaches himself through books at Fort Sullivan to be able to pass the bar exam, to become a lawyer and a practicing physician, on top of already having advanced degrees from West Point. It's incredible. I challenge you today to find somebody with degrees in each one of those topics in 2026. By 1835, following this tragedy, following all of his studies, Greene leaves the regular army. Promotions in the peacetime era armies are slow, and with slow promotions come slow increases in pay. Greene's had enough. He resigns his commission. And over the course of the next 20 years, he will host, or have, I should say, a number of different engineering projects. He'll work for several railroads. He'll work on a number of different engineering projects across the country. But by the time of the American Civil War, Greene has found himself back in New York City for the last several years. He's since remarried. He has started another family. He's had 6 children. One does pass in infancy with his second wife. As a matter of fact, 3 of the sons he'll have in the pre-Civil War era after the loss of his first family will go on to serve in the American Civil War, one of which, who also is another overlooked or underappreciated Union officer, is Dana Greene. Anybody know that name? Dana Greene is the executive officer on the USS Monitor and will be involved in the fight between the Monitor and the Merrimack in 1862. So Greene is in New York City. He is working on a number of engineering projects there, some of which had lasting implications. He worked on expanding the Croton Water Park in New York City. The Croton Water Park would serve residents in New York City with drinking water until 1997. Think about that, something that Greene designed. He's also going to expand the city's water reservoir. How many of you have ever been to Central Park in New York City? Seen those giant lake/ponds in New York City? George Sears Greene designed them and built them. Greene is also overseeing during this time the enlargement of a bridge that still stands in the Bronx, known as High Bridge. You can still go across it today in 2026. Hopefully you're beginning to see just how capable this man is. By 1861, however, the war has started. Greene has every right to sit out. By the time of the American Civil War, he is 60 years of age. After a year of the war progressing, in the fall of 1861, Greene offers his services to the United States military. He receives an appointment in January of 1862 as the colonel of the 60th New York Infantry. It will not be until later in 1862 that Greene will see his first combat experience of this particular war at the Battle of Cedar Mountain during the Second Manassas Campaign, as I mentioned, in August of 1862. So Greene is now in it. He is in the U.S. military again. He is with these New York units. He's commanding the 60th New York. He'll eventually rise to the rank to command 5 New York regiments as brigadier. He'll command a brigade in the Union Army. And by the time we get to the Battle of Gettysburg, Greene is 62 years of age. He is a brigadier general commanding, as I mentioned, 5 New York regiments. One veteran of the war who later profiled Greene as to what he looked like 163 years ago today. And I think it really sets for you the mood, if you will, of how Greene is going to impact the fighting on Culp's Hill. Greene was said at the time of Gettysburg of having a personal appearance of about 62 years old, thick set, 5 feet 10 inches high, of dark complexion, iron gray hair, full of gray beard and mustache, gruff in manner, and stern in appearance, but withal an excellent officer, and under a rough exterior, possessing a kind heart. In the end, his men learned to love and respect him, as much in the beginning they feared him. And this was saying a good deal on the subject. Greene knew how to drill, how to command, and in the hour of peril, how to care for his command. And the men respected him accordingly. These men did not like Greene when he first commands the 60th New York and when he takes over the brigade. He is a stern disciplinarian, and he expects these men to know their drill and drill them well. It's not out of any personal hatred or any animosity. Greene understands the better these regiments are drilled, the better they perform in battle. The better they perform in battle, the better their chances are of coming out of the battle alive. And Greene knew how to care for his men, and the way he cared for them was making sure they were well drilled and well disciplined. So we now have brought General Greene up to the time of the Battle of Gettysburg itself. And as I mentioned just moments ago, Greene is going to command 5 New York regiments, the 60th, 78th, 102nd, 137th, and 149th New York Volunteer Infantry Regiments. These men will come from such counties as Broome, Franklin, Onondaga, St. Lawrence, Tioga, and several others. Many of these men resided in towns before enlisting, such as Bath and Brooklyn, Buffalo, New York City, Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, and many others. A large majority of these men that did not hail from the larger metropolitan areas of Brooklyn and Manhattan and New York City were farmers and laborers. They consisted of Irish and German immigrants. There were Canadians in the ranks, Englishmen, Frenchmen, that were in these units. And believe it or not, one soldier was an Australian national that would sign up in one of these New York regiments. One entire company of the 78th New York had been raised in the state of Michigan. And all of these men would be with Greene here on July the 2nd, 1863. Now, before we bring Greene and his 5 New York regiments onto the battlefield and start talking about the fighting at Culp's Hill, we need to look at how the defense of Culp's Hill is going to change over the course of the battle between July 1st and July 2nd. Now, following 9 hours of fighting west and north of town on the first day of the battle, the defeated remnants of the Union Army's First Corps are going to be forced to retreat, and they are going to rally on a position, a fallback position that had been selected earlier in the day by 11th Corps Commander General Oliver Otis Howard. That position is Cemetery Hill. As that position is solidifying, as more Union soldiers are retreating to the hill and more Union reinforcements are arriving, the Union position on Cemetery Hill is going to expand to the south and east, what will be the northwest slopes of Culp's Hill. And that is why you're going to see at the top of the map today, I don't know if it'll show up there, in the top left, you're going to see First Corps units. The famed Iron Brigade and Lysander Cutler's Brigade, after their ordeal west of town, are now taking a position at about 5:30 p.m. on the afternoon of July the 1st. And as those units from the First Corps start to arrive in this area, one of the things they do is to start move some earth. They're going to start building some breastworks and entrenchments. Now, they haven't had experience. These First Corps troops haven't had experience building breastworks yet in their service history. And you got to understand, they've been fighting for the last 9 hours. They have been taking huge casualties throughout the first day's battle. So what they construct is, something that is quick, it's efficient, but it is nowhere near stout as what we're going to see later in our story. So the First Corps units are going to go into position about 5:30 p.m. on the evening of July 1st. Meanwhile, as those First Corps units are moving some soil and moving some rocks and logs up there, throwing up some temporary breastworks, General Greene's brigade, part of John Geary's division of the Union Army's 12th Corps, have arrived to Gettysburg, and they have been ordered into position at Little Round Top. As darkness will set on the battlefield of July 1st, Geary's division and Greene's men will be camping on the northern slopes of Little Round Top. At about 5 a.m. the next morning, Geary's division, including Greene's brigade, are going to receive orders to move from their positions south of the town of Gettysburg, south of Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill, and to march to Culp's Hill and extend the Union line to the south and east to consume not only Culp's Hill proper, but lower Culp's Hill as well. One of the misnomers when we talk about the fighting for Culp's Hill, it is not a singular hill. It is actually 2 hills with low ground in between, or what we can refer to as a saddle. So 5 a.m. on the morning of July 2nd, Greene and brigade, the rest of the brigades and Geary's division of the 12th Corps get ordered to head towards Culp's Hill. They will arrive there within the hour. Greene will later write in his official report of the battle that upon arriving to Culp's Hill, we took position at about 6 a.m. on the crest of a steep and rocky hill, being thrown back nearly at right angles with the line of the First Corps, Rock Creek running past our front at a distance of 200 to 400 yards. Our position in front were covered with a heavy growth of timber, free from undergrowth, with large ledges projecting above the surface. These rocks and trees offered good cover for marksmen. The surface was very steep on our left, diminishing to a gentle slope on our right. The position that Greene is going to take from the right of the First Corps is going to stretch roughly 1,500 yards. Greene is going to have 1,424 men with him. So roughly 1 yard per every soldier. This is already a pretty long line for Greene's brigade to be able to occupy. But at this point in time, we've got the rest of the Union Army's 12th Corps going into position around him to be able to strengthen the overall position itself. Now, Greene's position that he's occupied, this 1,500-yard front, is pretty naturally strong. If you look up to where the 60th New York is on the left of Greene's line, it's the strongest part of his overall position. Not only does it connect with the First Corps, so his left flank is secure, the men of the 60th are going to be able to dig in quite well in that area, and the terrain opposite the 60th New York here is horribly steep, littered with giant boulders. It'll be almost impossible for any attacking force to do so successfully to reach his line. But as Greene's position continues to stretch to the south and east, by the time we get to the center of his line, the terrain opposite their front is less steep. So it secures a much easier avenue of approach for any attacking Confederate column. But it still does give Greene some advantage. The end of Greene's line is here, with his rightmost regiment, the 137th New York. It is the weakest spot on Greene's overall position. Between the 60th New York, near the summit of Culp's Hill, and the right end of the 137th New York is a 90-foot drop in elevation. The 137th is in the lowest possible ground. Not only that, the left of Greene's line is 1,000 feet away. Command and control will be a challenge for this extended position, and this is just their initial deployment. Now, not long after getting into position, about 6 a.m. on the morning of July 2nd, there becomes a discussion about whether or not to entrench and build breastworks and strengthen the position itself. And there's a lot of historical debate about the orders in which to build these breastworks that Greene is going to supervise. There's one story by the regimental historian of the 149th New York, one of Greene's regiments, that said he overheard a meeting that was held by John Geary, Greene's divisional commander, and the other brigade commanders in Geary's division. And this regimental historian of the 149th says, yeah, I heard this conversation. The conversation between Geary division commander and his brigade commanders was that he, John Geary, the division commander, does not like breastworks, does not like entrenchments, because it unfits the men for fighting. Meaning that Geary believes that once you put men behind a protective barrier, they are not going to march out shoulder to shoulder 2 ranks deep in a wide open field and trade shots at 75 yards distance anymore. So the regimental historian of the 149th New York is saying, okay, I heard this conversation. Geary's saying we shouldn't build trenches, we shouldn't build any earthworks or breastworks because it's going to unfit the men. And that the conversation ended with our own General Greene saying, well, if my men have time to build them, they will have them. And that in this meeting, Greene persisted on being the one to have earthworks built on Culp's Hill. Now, we already know the First Corps threw up some soil the night before. Nothing near that what's going to be built along the 12th Corps line. Unfortunately for historians today, we've been unable to unearth any other accounts as to whether this meeting of John Geary and his brigade commanders actually took place. So we have a veteran of the 149th New York writing 2-3 decades after the war saying, I heard about a conversation that happened at the top of the hill. Regardless, if you want to believe Captain George Collins of the 149th New York in his regimental history, or some of the other stories that come out from this moment, that Geary himself does order breastworks to be built, or Geary says, I'm not going to order them to be built, but if you want them, go ahead and build them. Whichever way you come down on that individual part of the story, it's supported with primary source documents. But suffice it to say, breastworks are going to be built, and General Greene is going to personally supervise them. Greene, again, engineering degree from West Point, studies advanced engineering after the loss of his first family. The man understands terrain, and he also understands the importance of breastworks. Why? Because Greene had utilized them once before, and so had his brigade. 8 weeks before the Battle of Gettysburg, at the Battle of Chancellorsville, on the night of May 1st, Greene orders a space in front of his brigade's front, 200 feet wide, to be cleared of all trees, to open up fields of fire. With all of those trees, when he has them felled, he orders them to be felled with all of their branches pointing towards an advancing enemy attack. What other branches and lumber he pulls from having this front cleared, he has abattis constructed in front of his brigade's position. And he has his men start digging trenches. His men at Chancellorsville are going to use bayonets, tin cups, pieces of boards, bare hands, whatever they can find, since they lack entrenching tools. So it's not out of the realm for Greene's brigade. They have experience with this. And Greene understands, remember, this is a guy that likes to take care of his men, and putting them behind defensive positions does just that. So now at about 6 a.m., whatever way you come down on who orders the breastworks to be built, the orders from General Greene ripple through his 5 New York regiments to start building them. And when the orders first come down, the men in the ranks, not happy. They didn't have a great night's sleep the night before on the slopes of Little Round Top. The Gettysburg campaign at this point is nearly 5 weeks old. These guys have been marching. Believe it or not, we have weather data from 1863 from multiple weather stations across the geographical area that the Gettysburg campaign takes place in. June 1863 is the hottest month of that year. It is also the driest month of that year. These men have been on the march for 5 weeks in the hottest, driest conditions in wool uniforms carrying 40 pounds of gear on their back and a 10-pound weapon on their shoulder. So now on this hot July 2nd, 163 years ago, they're being told, start digging, start cutting down trees. And it's not like, here's your axe and entrenching tool, here's your tin plate, start digging. It's a lot of work. And so the men in Greene's brigade, as Captain Collins wrote in the regimental history of the 149th New York, they grumbled a little. And they said it was the old trade of building works never to be used. Nevertheless, they brought sticks, stones, and chunks of wood and felled trees and shoveled dirt for 3 or 4 hours. Captain Jesse Jones in the 60th New York noted what they had in front of them to be able to build these earthworks. He said, Culp's Hill was covered with woods, so all materials needful were at our disposal. Right and left the men felled trees. Piles of cordwood, which lay nearby, were quickly appropriated. The sticks, set slanting on end against the outer face of the logs, made excellent battening. All along the rest of the line of the core of similar defense was constructed. Fortunate regiments, which had spades and picks, strengthened their works with earth. Not only is Greene throwing up very impressive earthworks, Greene is also supervising this. Here's this guy, 62 years old, on foot, walking up and down Culp's Hill over the 6 hours of the construction. And he goes over to this unit. Okay, I want you to move the line, dig it a little bit over this way. And if you look at Greene's earthworks, and we'll come back to a map in a moment, Greene's earthworks aren't a straight line down Culp's Hill. Greene puts a number of areas throughout his position that will allow crossfire against oncoming units. Greene is utilizing his knowledge as an engineer and understanding of topographical and terrain features to yield devastating results against any attack that will come to his position. So not only are they throwing up what you see, and this is a contemporaneous sketch of a portion of Greene's line. In addition to that, Greene is going to order the men to build headlogs. So we're going to build these earthworks, we're going to dig down, we're going to lower the profile of the men, we're going to put wood in front of them, we're going to throw soil on the other side of the wood to act as battening, and now on top of it we're going to put a horizontal log. And there's going to be a gap between the bottom of that log and the top of the breastwork. So the only part that is exposed to me as one of Greene's soldiers is about here to here. And I'll stick my rifle down in that opening, pointing down slope towards an attacking unit. It's greatly going to act as a force multiplier for Greene's men and will save, as we will find out, a number of lives of Greene's soldiers. One of the last things we need to talk about in regards to these earthworks. Everybody's digging earthworks, and all along the 12th Corps line. At some point during the morning of July 2nd, someone is going to order a spare set of earthworks to be built. Not nearly as strong. This is a line that will be perpendicular to the main line of entrenchments. In military terms, we call this a traverse. What is the goal of a traverse? Well, if I build this static position, and I think you are the Confederates this day, are coming at me this way, and I have a static position, I'm lined up. But if I'm in this position waiting for an attack to come, and it turns out the Confederates come from that way, I got a problem. So I will build a line that is perpendicular to the main line of fortifications so I can change my field of fire. So perpendicular to Greene's line, they are going to build, not as well constructed, but an entrenchment. They're going to dig, and they're going to create this traverse so that in this scenario, if the Confederates don't come this way and I'm facing this direction and they come from this way, all I do is I fall back into the traverse. And now I've been able to change the direction to deal with the threat that's coming at me. We don't know who orders the traverse to be built, but it is built, and it will be a godsend for General Greene's men later in the fighting. Once the construction of the earthworks are complete, Greene is going to throw out a number of skirmishers out in his front. He'll be ordered to do so by his divisional commander, John Geary. Geary is going to order Greene to assemble a skirmish force, send them out there into no man's land between their main line and the enemy line, gather intelligence, and slow down any attack if it comes their way. Greene is going to have Lieutenant Colonel John Reddington of the 60th New York head up the skirmish line, of which he's going to draw a total of 170 men. That's nearly a full-size regiment worth of men out onto the skirmish line itself. And by 12 o'clock, noon, 163 years ago today, over 8,600 Federals stood behind the breastworks on Culp's Hill and along that skirmish line that Greene had sent out. And there they remain for the rest of the day. Now, to understand the rest of our story, I've got just several moments to encapsulate the Confederate plan for July 2nd. So, when we have questions after the program, you come up, don't be like, well, you didn't talk about this part of the Confederate plan, or you didn't mention this. We got to get to Greene's story, folks. The Confederate plan is this. Lee is going to order a massive attack against one end of the Union Army's line and a diversionary assault against the other. The diversionary assault will come with the caveat orders that if the diversionary assault looks like it has promise to be a victory, if converted into a real attack, it is to be done so. The main Confederate effort will be made against the Union Army's left, down on the southern end of the battlefield, which will eventually be Little Round Top, Devil's Den, Peach Orchard, etc. The diversionary assault will be made against the Union Army's right, Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. The idea, the principle behind putting a diversionary assault is that you want to pin that butterfly's wings to the board. You do not want any Union reinforcements to leave Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill and head down to the left end of the Union line when the Confederates are near victory or inflicting heavy damage to the opposite end of the line. You want to keep them pinned in that position. So that is the Confederate plan. And the Confederate plan begins at about 3:30 on July 2nd. Now, the diversionary assault and the main attack is supposed to go off at the same time. The diversionary assault is delayed by nearly 90 minutes. So that negates this idea of keeping those Union soldiers pinned on Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill, because now, after 90 minutes of fighting, the far left end of the Union Army down at Little Round Top and Devil's Den and Houck's Ridge and the Peach Orchard and the Wheat Field, they are under severe pressure, largely due to that guy we started the program with. And they are calling for reinforcements. So where does General Meade find reinforcements? Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. And now the orders come down the chain of command from General Meade through Henry Slocum, Alpheus Williams, and now down to John Geary. And Geary would later write in his official report that at about 7 p.m. he received an order from Henry Slocum telling him to take his whole division, leave Culp's Hill in its entirety, and follow the other division of the 12th Corps, the 1st Division, off towards the Union Army's left down near Little Round Top. Now, what happens next is there's a little bit of horse trading that's taking place. And Alpheus Williams gets involved. This is Henry Slocum on the left, by the way, George Meade up there on the right, and Little Round Top in the center. There's little horse trading. I don't think we should send all of the 12th Corps to the left. I think we need to send 99% of the 12th Corps to the left. Well, maybe we only send 80%. There's a little horse trading going back and forth. And finally, it's decided we're going to evacuate all the 12th Corps except one brigade. Now, one brigade is going to have to be chosen to be left behind to cover the rest of Culp's Hill, where 8,600 men once were, now one brigade's got to cover all of it. And that brigade, from the 12th Corps that's going to be chosen to remain behind, is the brigade of George Sears Greene. At the same time that these orders are coming in to evacuate Culp's Hill, Lieutenant Colonel John Reddington has seen a lot of movement out there on the skirmish line. He's out here with these blue little hashes along Rock Creek, and he's seen a lot of movement on the other side of the creek. The Confederates preparing for this diversionary assault. And so Reddington is going to send word back to the main line, to Greene, and he's going to ask Greene for more men to be sent out onto the skirmish line. And so Greene is going to oblige, he's going to send out a pretty good chunk of the 78th New York to shore up the rest of that skirmish position. When they do so, it's a little detail for you hardcore Gettysburg folks. The 78th New York at this time is actually on the left of the 60th. When Reddington's request comes in, they are going to pull out of line, they're going to march in the rear down the slope, and right here in this area where the 102nd New York is, the 78th is going to cross over the breastworks and push out to the skirmish line. The remnants of the 78th New York is going to be held in reserve, and they will fill in gaps along Greene's line as those gaps become readily apparent in our story in just a moment. So what you have to imagine in this map now is the 137th New York. Everything down this way, all gone. All these guys here, gone. It's just the 1st Corps and Greene's brigade. And Greene has a real big problem because his line ends right here. Look at all of these other breastworks that have been built throughout the day. He's got to cover all of that with just 1,424 men. His position from here to here is already 1,500 yards. That's 3 feet per man. He's in a real quandary. How is he going to cover this distance? One soldier in the 60th New York who would write home on July the 6th, he said, "Our regiment was extended in one thin line, the men fully 2 feet apart. We had the work of 3 regiments to do, and we did it. Inspired by the necessity and importance of the moment, every man multiplied himself. Every man worked as if he knew his own life depended on his effort." Now, the 102nd New York, the next regiment down after the 60th, they're going to receive orders to undouble their lines. So remember, Civil War soldiers, shoulder to shoulder, 2 ranks deep. One way we can extend the length of our line is undouble it. Pull that rear rank, place them in the front. Doubles the length of your front. So the 102nd is going to do that. As we continue to move down towards the right of Greene's line, the 78th New York, as I mentioned, is going to plug in some gaps, as well as some men of the 60th New York left behind on the main line. They're going to plug in some gaps. The 149th New York on this map will also undouble their lines to help spread the wealth, if you will, along these abandoned Union earthworks. Last but not least, the 137th New York. And if you go up there and walk this, folks, and I don't recommend it today, if you go up and walk it, you will be astonished how long Greene's new line is. Because the 137th New York here, after all of this shifting to cover the abandoned works, their new position ends down here. It's an incredibly thin line. It's an incredibly long line. But the earthworks that Greene's men have constructed throughout the day are going to pay dividends in the coming moments. As the Confederate attack moves forward, by 7:30 p.m., the skirmishers leading the Confederate assault is making their way towards Rock Creek. Now, the Confederate assault is being against Culp's Hill is being led by Major General Edward Allegheny Johnson. Johnson will have 3 brigades at his disposal. One of the brigades in his command is going to be left behind. That's the famed Stonewall Brigade. But Johnson's division is going to consist of 3 brigades, about 4,700 men from the states of Virginia, Louisiana, Maryland, and North Carolina. And these 4,700 men, I cannot imagine what they've been thinking, because what they heard all day while they've been laying in position is the building of these trenches. They have heard axes, they have heard picks, they have heard continual digging, rocks being dropped. They have literally heard a Gibraltar being constructed opposite their front. And they can't see it. Could you imagine knowing that a fortification's being built that you can't see, that you're going to have to attack later? I mean, it's horrifying prospects for these Confederates. But now they are on the march. And by 7:30 p.m., the two skirmish lines of the opposing advance elements of the two lines have finally met. Sergeant Martin Olmsted, he's pictured there on the left of the screen, wrote about the two skirmish lines when they made contact. He said, "As soon as the advanced skirmish line came within reach of us, we opened a brisk fire upon it. The smoke of the battle gathering under the dense foliage of the trees, together with the dusk of the evening, soon brought out to view the flashes of musketry. And so near us came the solid line of battle at one time that its tramp, tramp, and the sharp, short commands of its officers became clearly audible." Olmsted's saying that the skirmish lines, darkness is fading on them. The skirmish lines are getting so close, he, in the 102nd New York, out on the skirmish line, can hear what the Confederate officers are ordering their skirmish line to do. That's how close they're getting before they get into combat. As the skirmish line comes under attack, as Lieutenant Colonel John Reddington's skirmish line comes under attack, they begin to fall back under the weight of the Confederate assault. Reddington would later write in his report that he therefore fell back slowly with his men, and he contested every inch of ground, the enemy close on our heels and firing occasional volleys at us. The darkness was so great in this part of the woods that we could not see the enemy, and we fired at the flashes of their guns. They, the enemy, were so close to us that we took 12 prisoners. The skirmish line has caught up so quickly to Reddington's skirmish line that Confederates are getting in and amongst Reddington's skirmish line. And some of Reddington's men are just grabbing these Confederates and taking them with them. They realize that guy next to me, his gun ain't pointing the right direction. And so the skirmish line takes at least a dozen prisoners, and now they are racing up the slopes towards Greene's defensive works. And this is a precarious moment for the skirmish line, because now they are making a large rustle of noise, moving through this terrain in the dark towards Greene's 1,400 men that are sitting in those positions with their guns aimed at them. The officers in Greene's brigade will talk about in numerous reports and letters that it was all they could do to keep their men from not firing into the skirmish line. The skirmishers are racing up the hill to get into the safety of the earthworks before the Confederates get there. And these officers of these New York regiments are having to pace up and down the line and tell the men, hold your fire, hold your fire. The skirmishers are frantically trying to get up. They're yelling as they're running up the slopes, don't shoot, friendlies coming in, New Yorkers coming in. Captain George Collins of the 149th New York remembered that the skirmish line came running back, followed by a Confederate line of battle, yelping and howling in its peculiar manner. Some of the skirmishers were killed in sight of the brigade, and an occasional stray bullet came whizzing by the heads of the men in the rifle pits, who were so eager and clamorous that it was all the officers could do to prevent them from opening fire before the men in the skirmish line could come in. The skirmishers, seeing their men in danger, cried out in an agonizing and beseeching manner. Now, as the skirmish line pulls back, and with the main Confederate attack moving up the slope against Greene's position, he quickly realizes he needs help. There's no way he's going to be able to blunt this attack by himself. So, who's the closest help that he has? The 1st Corps units to his left. And he sends a messenger over to General Wadsworth over there and says, I need help. I got Confederates making their way to my position. Can you send me reinforcements? Wadsworth tells the messenger to ride back to Greene and tell him the following. Wadsworth tells Greene, I can't send you anybody at the moment. Yes, I don't have any Confederates attacking towards my front, but that can change. I can't deplete my force and send them to you, and then a Confederate attack come towards my position. So I can't send you anybody. But what I can do is I can order the men in my units to get in line, get out of the trenches, get in line, get in formation, get their weapons loaded, half cock, percussion cap on the cone, await further orders. So at the very moment I know, me, Wadsworth, I know no Confederate attacks coming my front, I will release them and send them to you. This is not good news for Greene, and he's going to send out further messengers and staff officers towards Cemetery Hill looking for all unavailable reinforcements. Meanwhile, the Confederates will reach Greene's line. Now, what you have to understand at this part of the story is that when the Confederates began their attack, they were perpendicular to the Union line. So they have to swing to reach all of Greene's position. If you've ever been in marching band or if you've been in a parade, the guys on the inside have the shortest distance to go. They're going to get to where they need to go first. The guys on the outside of the line have the biggest steps to make. It's going to take them the longest to get there. And so the first part of this Confederate attack is going to reach the left end of Greene's line near that pivot point as the fighting begins at about 7:30 p.m. This attack, almost hit the wrong button. This attack is going to be led by Brigadier General John Jones and several regiments from the state of Virginia. Captain Steuben Kuhn of the 60th New York said that not a shot was fired at them until they got within 15 rods. And then the order was given, fire. And we did fire and kept firing. If ever men loaded and fired more rapidly than the 60th did on that occasion, I never saw them do it. The rebels yelled like wild Indians and charged upon us at a double quick. They acted bravely. They came as close as they could. But those that did get close never went away again. We gave them a welcome with leaden bullets that sent many a brave rebel, for they are brave, to his last account. Well, they retreated in a hurry. Soon we heard the rebels coming again. Our men sprang to their places. This time they came with a rush. They had been reinforced and thought to drive us out certain. And again, death met them in the face. They charged again and again and retreated. After multiple attacks, the Virginians are unable to break the left end of Greene's line. And at 10 p.m., Jones and the Virginians will be waved off from any further assaults against the left end of Greene's position. Now, towards the center of Greene's line, as that Confederate attack is coming more online, is the next Confederate brigade of several regiments from the state of Louisiana, under the command of Colonel Jesse Williams. Now, there is some debate as to whether the Louisianans got there first or the Virginians, and we're not going to get into that. But suffice it to say, the Louisianans, as we talked about Greene's position a little earlier, they're going to hit towards the center of Greene's line, and the ground is a little less steep. It's a much easier avenue of approach. And so the Louisianans are going to get to about 100 yards before Greene's center of his line before they order the assault, and the Louisianans charge towards the center of Greene's position. A soldier that identified himself as the Sword and Pen submitted a letter to the Syracuse Standard newspaper a week after the battle. He said, "The rebels advanced and a perfect storm of lead was poured into them, mowing them down like grass. But still the rascals stood their ground well and returned the fire with interest. Our men, however, were protected by their breastworks and consequently suffered comparatively little." On the other side of that charge was Captain Nathan J. Rawlings of the 14th Louisiana. He would recall over the next several hours, he said, 3 times we charged their breastworks and were repulsed. But the 4th time we succeeded. After a heroic struggle and the loss of many men, I was shot in the left leg and bayoneted in the left breast. The flag of the 14th Louisiana during this fight had nearly 200 bullet holes in it at its end. 1 shell hole and 1 shell fragment that perforated the flag during those multiple assaults. But like the Virginians to their right, at around 10 p.m., Jesse Williams will call off any further attacks against Greene's line, and it is held. That soldier we heard from the 14th Louisiana, Captain Nathan J. Rawlins, who was wounded in the left leg and breast, he would write of the attack, and I think it's so instructional for us today in 2026. Many of us are commenting on the younger generations coming up. Rawlins wrote, "The young folks of today don't know anything about hard times." Now, finally, the last part of this Confederate assault is reaching Greene's position. Again, if we go to that pendulum, these are the guys that have the farthest to go. This is George Maryland Stewart's brigade. It's a mixed brigade of men from North Carolina, Maryland, and Virginia. And they, unfortunately, have a number of obstacles. And they are going to arrive towards Greene's position much later than the Louisianans and the Virginians. Where Stewart's brigade is crossing Rock Creek, this area here, happens to be the deepest point of Rock Creek. So when they come down the embankment, the water's much higher. It slows them down getting across. Now the right of Stewart's brigade, the 3rd North Carolina and 1st Maryland Battalion, do get across and they move into the attack quite quickly. And as they do so, they're going to slam into the front of the 149th New York. But remember I talked about Greene's line. You see all these little 90-degree turns and 45-degree turns. As they slam into the front of the 149th New York, look at the 137th. They're going to open a crossfire into the left of the 1st Maryland Battalion and the 3rd North Carolina. They are able to do this because the left end of Stewart's brigade have still not arrived into the assault. Not only do they reach the deepest part of Rock Creek, and you might be able to see it right here. They go down into the creek and they come up on dry land and they think they're good to go. They've gone onto a little island in the middle of the creek. And when they commence the assault, they've got to go back down into the creek a second time and up out of the creek and now begin their attack. So the 3rd North Carolina and the 1st Maryland Battalion of Stewart's brigades for a moment are taking all of the fire from the right end of Greene's line. They are taking heavy fire to their front by the 149th New York and heavy fire in their flank from the 137th New York. The firing was so hot. Captain George Collins of the 149th New York wrote his wife Kate a week after the battle. He said, when the fight commenced on us, it was furious and lasted until we had fired away about 80 rounds of cartridges. Remember, standard issue, 40 rounds. So these guys are finding extra rounds and throwing them down range. Collins wrote that the fighting here was hellish enough and made me sick. Collins was not exaggerating. In front of the 149th New York, 8 Confederates, after the fighting of July 2nd, 8 were found dead in a spot only 8 feet square. These men were from one company and were all killed at the same moment during the assault. There is a lot of lead going down range. And because of this delay of the rest of Stewart's brigade, and because of the overwhelming fire in their front and their flank, what's really interesting about this part of the fight is something that rarely happens. Not only do night attacks rarely happen, what we're experiencing, but the commanders of the 3rd North Carolina and the 1st Maryland Battalion are ordering their men to go to ground. They are going to continue this fight not by making repeated charges up the hill like the Louisianans and Virginians. They're going to lay on their stomachs. They're going to fire their round. They're going to roll onto their back, go through the 9-step process of loading their weapon in the dark on their back, roll back on their stomach, and fire at the flashes in their front against the 149th New York. Now, as the right end of Stewart's brigade finally gets across Rock Creek and they begin their assault, the 10th Virginia, these guys right here, the 10th Virginia informs General Stewart, that there is a stone wall in his position, you can see it here, that is abandoned. Stewart orders the 10th Virginia to follow that wall into the rear of the force that they are attacking. And now the men of the 10th Virginia and the 23rd Virginia, largely we'll finish our story today, will move into the attack. As they do so, and they're moving along this stone wall, you can begin to see what happens. Look at all these abandoned earthworks that were built earlier in the day. The line of Greene's 137th New York just ends. And now, with the 10th Virginia and the 37th Virginia attacking the right end of the 137th New York, their colonel, David Ireland, realizes what's going on. He's got a problem. And Ireland, against overwhelming odds, is going to order the right company of the 137th to refuse their line. He's going to bend back one portion of the regiment. If that sounds familiar, Joshua Chamberlain and Little Round Top. Joshua Chamberlain, despite Jeff Daniels' heroic performance, does not invent refusing the line. He does not invent swinging like a door. It's in every manual that infantry tactics have at the time. And so Ireland refuses the right half, or the right company, of the 137th New York to deal with this new threat. Lieutenant Samuel Wheelock of the 137th New York in a July 6 letter wrote that taking advantage of our want of support on the right, a body of rebels succeeded in turning our right flank and gained a position behind a stone wall directly in our rear, not more than 100 yards distance. Well, after about 20 minutes, maybe, of fighting, the refused right flank of the 137th New York is no match. And Ireland realizes the time now is to get out. He's going to have to fall back. I think what's so great, not a perfect adjective, what's so interesting about this part of the fight, this part of the story, Chamberlain is going through the same thing a little earlier on Little Round Top. And despite the movie and the Killer Angels that makes it seem like there's this giant Alabamian horde that is attacking Little Round Top, the fight between the 15th Alabama and the 20th Maine is 1-to-1. Their numbers are exactly the same. The 137th New York is like 3-to-1 odds against them.